Welcome everyone to another edition of TradeView Live. I'm your co-host, Ben Tracy. I lead business development at Vision, joined here by Kyle, our CEO and co-founder. And today we have a special guest, Lori Ann LaRocco, a supply chain whisperer, an author, industry veteran of CNBC most recently, and we are honored to have you as a guest. Lori Ann, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be a lot of fun. I love using your data, so can't wait to see what you have.
Absolutely. We've been following you and obviously all that you've written, but recently what you've been doing on your Substack and your blog and the event that you're hosting here in less than 4 weeks in Washington, D.C., which Kyle will be attending. Containers Don't Lie. We'll hopefully talk more about that as we go through this. All right. Why don't we go through some of our disclaimers for anyone who's joining here for the first time, dialing into TradeView Live. You might want to know a little bit on what we're talking about. Kyle, let's let everybody know, what is TradeView?
TradeView is the leading industry intelligence platform. When you want to know anything about containerized freight, because as Lori Ann will tell you, containers don't lie, the answer is typically in TradeView. We cover 57% of all containerized freight globally, 3 times more than any platform, profiled 1.5 million companies that are moving, receiving, working with containerized freight in some way. That means you get supplier and product networks mapped out. And of course, there's an AI researcher. We leverage TradeView to generate and share all of the insights that are in this presentation with you today.
And where does the data come from that powers the TradeView platform and powers some of the insights we're walking through today?
For the past 6 years, we've built more than 270 plus proprietary data connections to get information from carriers, logistics providers, tech platforms, you name it, governments, et cetera, and then make sense of all that data to give you unprecedented big V visibility, which is far more than just tracking a container. It's entire market visibility down to the micro level.
And we've talked a lot over the last year, really, and we'll go through even today about leading indicators in some of our data, forward-looking data, scheduled arrivals, things that aren't in the past. So how are we able to look ahead and into what will happen in the future?
So we're in the privileged position to receive nearly half of all of the ocean freight booking requests generated worldwide every single day. And we see those go from requests to accepted to shipping instructions to active shipments, et cetera. So we understand what freight is moving when and where in the world, looking out 90 days into the future for the delivery of that freight. And that helps us really model the entire world to understand how volumes are shifting, how that's going to affect performance, and how that filters out to all of the different parties, goods, et cetera.
And so we're really excited to walk you through what's happened in the last 2 weeks since we last had a TradeView Live session. We have some custom views on different indicators of what's been happening. And obviously there's so much, not just in the Middle East, but really around the world. And for our guest here, Lori Ann, your perspective on these topics, really since we started writing about them with TradeView a little over a year ago, has been really helpful, both at CNBC and at G-Captain and other places where the TradeView data we're able to send over to you can really help inform your stories. But talk to us a little about what you're doing with this event you're putting on, this symposium that's happening in just a few weeks.
Sure. So, and thank you so much for giving me the chance. So you and I, all 3 of us, we have done a lot of conferences, and I wanted to create something where real actionable information in a safe space would occur. Mm-hmm. And with the war and with all the uncertainty that we were having with tariffs, it's been a dream of mine to create a symposium where you have every layer of the supply chain, every participant, where it's the data guys like you, the logistics providers, the ocean carriers, the government relation officials, the private equity firms that are investing in companies, right, like yours and other port infrastructures, could get together and discuss what is happening under Chatham House rules, where you could have real actionable information shared and given. And so I put together the best of the best to give just that. So, Jan Hoffman from the World Bank, he's going to be announcing, that it's that coveted world port rankings, right? Where they come up with that. Jan is going to be unveiling that at the event, as well as talking about his views on what's going on with the world of trade. And then I wanted to lead it through like a pyramid where every layer, it's a one-on-one discussion that I have with these leaders, and then Q&A with the audience and breakout sessions. And so you're going to learn about Gen AI from MIT CTL, and she's going to walk you through, Elena's going to walk you through, well, what the heck is it? How do you do it? And then an example is going to be using procurement to kind of, because everyone's like a visual learner. And then we're going to talk supply chain financing, because you can use it on the front and back end. You could also use supply chain financing to get your tariff money back. And I don't mean by, using like those predatory lenders where you get like 1% back. It's like legit, you get your money back. And then you've got the head of the Panama Canal is going to be there to give us a deep dive as to what's going on, but more importantly about El Nino. And so, they're at 15% plus capacity, Ben, where they've got all this rain, right? That the rainwater that they can use now. But you and I both know you're one drought away of disaster. And with the flow of trade going on with the Middle East, we're going to have more transits going through the Panama Canal for at least the next year because of what's going on. Absolutely. And then USMCA, we have somebody from USTR coming. So I wanted people to make it worth their time to get together and get that info. And that's what I'm doing. And because Vision is a sponsor, one of my sponsors, I wanted to offer all of your customers the opportunity to come as my guest. Wow. So, you can come, free of charge, of course, get there on your own, get the hotel, but, to be a part of this much needed discussion, because I think together we're better.
Yeah. Agreed.
And that's what's important.
Well, thank you for that offer. Of course, if you are a Vision customer, reach out to us. You can also go to containersdon'tlie.com, as you see on the slide there. And if you're not a Vision customer, first of all, why? But if you're not a Vision customer and you still want to attend the event, Lori Ann, they can go to that website and reach out in terms of their interest, right?
Yeah, and they could even email me directly. So, or message me on LinkedIn. So that's the fastest way as well.
Well, it sounds like a great event. And yeah, excited to hear Kyle's takeaways. Again, it sounds like, with the nature of the discussions and how transparent and open folks can be, you've got to be in the room to really be a part of that shared learnings and discussion. Chatham House rules, right? We're not going to publicize or record anything that's said there. But if you're able to make it to DC, it sounds like a worthwhile trip. Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Wonderful. Well, why don't we segue into what's happened in the Middle East? And I don't mean like the latest tweet or headlines, because depending on what hour you're looking at it, is it open? Is it not open? Is this half of the strait open? Is this half of the strait not open? But really what we see in the data. And what we're looking at here is booking volumes spread out across the impacted ports. And it's been really interesting to follow it, in this case, over the last, 40, 50 days or so. So Kyle, what are you seeing in the trends here so far?
Yeah, well, as certain ports were really no longer available for making port calls inside the strait, we saw a major shift going from inside the Persian Gulf to essentially the west coast of Saudi Arabia, and then even a little bit of Oman to some extent. But they have a nice dotted red line here talking about when that shift happened for, Jebel Ali is dropping, Jeddah is taking over. There's a land bridge that was set up for quite a bit of drayage trucking to get shipments where they needed to be for that new location for imports into the Middle East. Another call out is Turkey also took up quite a bit of the volume as well, also getting land bridge coverage into the Middle East through that. But as you can see, there was an initial drop. There was some hesitation, just wait and see what's going to play out. But as the situation in its current, let's say, warm state is been normalized for the rest of the world, we can see the volume start to pick up across the board to be getting goods into the Middle East or goods out of the Middle East. It's just having to be moved a different way.
Yeah, exactly. Lori Ann, I'm thinking of, you're saying containers don't lie. It also looks like containers don't stop, right? Trade finds a way ultimately.
Yep.
And we saw the dip and we saw the disruption. You have ports that have to take safety precautions, and ships and crew, obviously, that are impacted.
Yeah.
And yet we are finding ways for containers to continue to flow. But what have you heard on the ground? How are operators and shippers able to respond to these adaptations and get the goods to where they need to go?
Sure. I mean, like you point out, trade's like water, it flows. And what happens that we see with these bottlenecks is that the new route takes longer, right? Trade at rest is not making money, but also it comes to that point of like trade at longer distances costs more money. And so you're at this inflection point where you've got some shipper saying, do I wait or do I move? And so I've spoken with some folks in the Middle East, and it's the latter. You can't afford to keep your product in the warehouse or at the port because you're getting paid, detention or demurrage charges. So what happens is when you're doing this land bridge, it normally takes, for those folks that are watching us, it normally takes about, from an ocean transit from Turkey, say, to the Middle East, it normally takes between 20 to 25 days. But because of the land bridge, all right, and there's two different ways when you're looking at Turkey, you can literally go all by land, right? So you go all by land all the way down through Saudi Arabia, across the land to those ports that, you cannot access via the waterway. That adds time. And so either you go through the Suez, and, that has been relatively safe, knock on wood for now, or by land all the way, you're looking at additional 10 to 12 days. So that increases your travel time exponentially. And so, and it's also adding more costs. Like one provider was telling me he is moving freight that would normally go from, say, just on the ocean from point A to point B. It's now going by ocean, by truck, by rail, or sometimes even by barge in order to get to the final destination. All of those nodes cost money. But in the end, you have to say, well, do I pay a little bit more money, but I get my freight for that, for the surety, or do I sit and wait? But this is the time for being nimble, right? Yeah. You got to know your supply chain. This is why I love your data, because you get to see that visibility of on the water where I have not seen it anywhere else. And that's why I love using you guys. So you can see what's on the water, and then you can see where it's going to go. The more you have that visibility into your transit, the more you're able to pivot.
Yep.
And that, to me, I think is priceless. And so that's what I'm seeing specifically in the Middle East right now.
For sure. And so on the topic of pivots and reroutes and sort of the adaptations that have happened, I think about it in terms of a disruption like this. You got winners and losers. You have carriers, you have ports, you have industries that are more negatively impacted than others, maybe to put it in a more delicate way. But here we have a country, like an entire economy that is actually poised to benefit in some way from an increase in volume. So Kyle, what are we seeing here? You have a year-over-year comparison?
Yeah, Turkey, effectively weekly TEU imports. And we have a nice little 4-week trend line here showing you the volumes as a TEU perspective of imports into Turkey across, from week 19 in 2025, the low of the holiday week at the end of the year. But it's up and to the right. And as the uncertainty has grown in the Middle East, it's even moved more up and to the right, with a peak of 31,000, let's say, TEUs on a weekly basis. So Turkey has been one of the primary answers to the situation around how to get freight in and out of the Middle East. Because also, let's note, air freight hasn't been as available for the Middle East with the airspace closures. And then also with the concern and issues around jet fuel access.
Yeah. And Lori Ann, I'm curious what you think about this from a business perspective, right? You have companies, you've got truckers, you've got port operators, carriers, and freight forwarders in Turkey on the ground that are seeing this increase in volume. But I can imagine that they're also thinking, how long will this last? Is this a permanent growth in our business that we should be prepared to be able to service this new demand for the next 9 months? Or are they really approaching this week by week? How do you think about this in terms of a business and how they can plan for potentially a change in volume?
Well, I mean, when you look at what's happening, it's a result of the strait being closed. And so when you look at what's going on right now, even if it opened up tomorrow, which it's not going to, all right, and I mean like legit opening, I don't mean the stuff what we're seeing now.
Right.
It's going to take time. It's going to take at least 6 months for the strait to get cleared. All of the minesweepers, they're in Europe, they're in Asia. It takes travel time, at least two weeks to a month for them to get there, right? That's one thing. The second thing is when you look at the health of the ports themselves, Iran has bombed a lot of the refineries, right? The pipelines. We do not know the extent of the damage when it comes to all of that. So, I mean, I know you guys are not tanker guys, but it's a whole other bailiwick.
Right.
But you also have to look at the infrastructure, the roads. How are they when it comes to that throughput? You guys are all about velocity, right? We're not going to know that until you literally start seeing, right, the ports being opened. This is more, I think, of a long term, or at least for a year for the trucking companies there. But also what we're going to see is things that we're seeing here locally. The price of diesel. You know, the LMI was released yesterday, and on my Substack, I wrote about it. And you are now seeing a shift because of the price of freight. You are now seeing a front loading type of phenomenon where you do see freight coming in a little bit early, but shippers are waiting to have all of their stuff go into a truck. I spoke with a very large company yesterday. They are filling the box. That you are not going to have a truck move half full. You're not.
Yeah.
You can't afford it. So you're going to see almost that rollover effect where you're going to have all that product like shoved in the box. So you have a full truck moving to the final destination. And so that's also an opportunity where the trucking companies already have the fuel surcharges, but they're also going to get more bang for their buck now because you're going to have more boxes in that truck.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So we're going to see that. If we're seeing that already in the United States, you sure as heck know. And by the way, drayage prices are way up. I spoke with an ocean carrier, and everyone on this line, everyone's going to get a chuckle when I say this. The ocean carriers are now going to the drayage companies saying, excuse me, if you're going to increase prices, you got to give us 30 days notice. And they're increasing prices by well over 50, 60%.
Yeah.
Because of the price of diesel. So now's the time. And so with all of that, it's going to be at least a year of profitability.
Yep. And even have some context around that as well. So, even looking at the price of crude versus jet fuel, and this is outlining, and this was about 2 weeks old at this point now, but looking at Brent crude today versus the low sulfur fuel for ocean going and the jet fuel today, and seeing the difference also, Brent crude is up, but there are definitely higher prices for jet fuel and low sulfur fuel as of 2 weeks ago. And part of that is not just the change in terms of the supply to produce these fuels, but it's also about where the demand is and the challenge for getting the fuel there.
Most definitely.
Its price doesn't just go up because, the costs of producing it go up. It's also the availability where you actually need it as well. And so there's a premium in certain places for jet fuel now.
Absolutely. No, that's helpful. I think the different topics here, just to round out, we were talking about Turkey, and I think the commentary here is this volume, this surge is likely to stay. And so if you're thinking about hiring as a trucker, a port operator, a freight forwarder, it's likely hiring you need to make because this demand is most likely not going to go away anytime soon. Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm sorry to just to piggyback off of what Kyle said. Jet fuel in Europe, this is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes.
The hole in the bucket is getting larger every day. When you see the amount of jet fuel that's coming from Europe, from the United States to Europe, it's getting there, but they're still a big loser compared to competing with Asia. Asia's getting the lion's share. And so we already have rollovers of air freight. Planes are not going up in the sky until that belly is full.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to definitely see even more product, if you can, move by land.
That makes sense.
Absolutely. And you're even mentioning the surcharge information before, because that's being layered on in many different ways now from the containerized freight world perspective, you know, whether it's emergency fuel surcharges, inland fuel surcharges. Again, this was as of 2 weeks ago, but we're seeing, you know, multiple, you know, the true price of what you're purchasing with these freight services is not just the rate. It's also all of the additional fees on top of it. And I think you have a guest at Containers Don't Lie next week. Laneway, I think, is going to be there, who talks a lot about this topic.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got Andrew Peterson.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But not to tangent too much. Getting back to
Kyle, why don't we go to some of the slides we have around U.S. imports? I don't know. We could spend a little bit of time on the port performance we put together here. What we're seeing is our unique view, which is not just how long vessels are waiting outside or inside the port, but how long containers are waiting to get picked up. Which what you see in the port of Long Beach and the port of LA, much higher volume. Both ports show a lot of volatility this year so far. This is just January to today, daily average dwell. And this is a daily metric that we refresh as a rolling 7-day average. And we've had increases and decreases up and down. And most recently, just in the last week, trending up and to the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, you were making a comment earlier about
this also, Ben, is, you know, the yellow line is vessel arrival, the arrival area to then getting to a berth, which they're very consistent on getting those vessels in and out. And even the time it spends at berth getting worked, pretty consistent, all things considered as well. And no, these vessels are large enough that they're typically staying at berth for almost an entire day. Some of the vessels up to 2 days getting worked. And so, like, the cranes are working. What's happening, though, is what's going on the yard side. And the ups and downs of, you know, labor unions, access to assets, dealing with, you know, even there was a port fire, not in Long Beach, I think it was LA.
It was LA.
But there's a lot that happens and changes very quickly. And as you're mentioning before, Lori Ann, regardless of performance, those fees are going to accumulate, regardless of whose fault it is. Now, the question is who's going to pay it at the end of the day. And the bill always kind of comes around to the BCO eventually, in some way.
And then to us eventually.
Right.
Yeah. But also, too, the other thing is, you know, Kyle, I interviewed Gene Soroka not too long ago. And I asked him about energy prices out there. He's saying the truckers are hurting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, no kidding, right? I mean, California, it's insane. The pricing of energy out there is just through the roof. And so when you're looking at these dwell times, you know that they're waiting, they're eating up gas, you know, they're eating up their diesel. Intermodal, we always know that intermodal has a problem on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dwell times, they tell a really interesting story.
And again, we update this every 24 hours from, you know, it's based on us tracking 3 million containers every single day worldwide. So it's a great depth of data. And we're even showing the volume of data in terms of TUs that were behind these numbers in the background of the chart. Yeah. But, you know, what does this mean? Okay, we can start talking about, well, actually, we were talking about the U.S. West Coast, but curious, Lori Ann, how much is Vancouver coming up in the news for you guys right now?
For me, yeah, I haven't focused on it a lot at all, Kyle, just because I've been, you know, bobbing and weaving so much with with looking at the problems with India and the problems with the chemicals and the oil, just because we're going to have a massive supply chain hit when it comes to the critical components that make everything from chips to clothing. And so in the end, that's going to impact containers.
That's a good segue because, India to all destinations. But just to give you a heads up, the landside performance of Vancouver has been deteriorating rapidly over the past few weeks.
Both on rail and truck, or where are you seeing worse?
Both, for both modes leaving.
That's interesting.
So just a flag for people to go take a peek at if they're dependent on Vancouver in some way, shape, or form. But you brought up India, and India to all destinations, and they haven't appeared to be as much a winner in terms of the China plus one strategy as other players.
They haven't, but you've had some key players move over. The big thing is, like, when you're looking at the world of trade, you want to see where your new tomorrow is, right? And where I look for my new tomorrow is, where is MSC investing? Where is Maersk investing? They're investing billions in India as well as in Africa, right? You and I both know if they build it, they will come, right? MSC was one of the first to land their stakes in Vietnam. Look at the powerhouse, right, when it comes to that. The problems that I'm seeing right now, Kyle, with India is the fact that they are literally getting clobbered when it comes to crude. They don't have, as you know, they don't have the infrastructure to hold a lot of crude. They have a 2-week supply. So when this hit with Iran, it was bad. And so they felt it first. I was speaking with one of my chemical contacts yesterday. I'm actually going to be writing about it in my Substack. They have an LNG shortage, and they use LNG for power. They are now cutting off LNG to the chemical manufacturers so they can deploy that LNG elsewhere. And so that's a problem, because a lot of the critical components that come out of India are made with plastics. They're made the critical components for the semiconductor boards that are in everything from, AI, your Apple phones, your solar panels, all of this. And so I'm looking at this as, holy cow. And the chemical manufacturers are telling me that not only is everything being depleted out of that area and elsewhere, it's more expensive. And so that's going to smack us hard. And if you can't operate like with India, if they're going to curb back chemicals where they make a lot of money, they're also curbing back the manufacturing of their apparel and everything else. And coupled with that, diesel. It takes 2 days to travel for a truck to come from a manufacturing plant to a port. This is something that we need to be looking at. And when you're looking at your TEUs, you're going to see that reflected.
And, even from a supply chain dependency perspective, many of, say, the exports are relying on raw ingredients that are actually sourced out of Middle East and the Red Sea. If you're talking about any kind of plastic being created, it's typically going to be some chemical that is being shipped out of the Red Sea in some way, shape, or form. And on the ocean-going fuel side, I mean, India only has so much bunkering capability. It's really Singapore is the gas station for ocean-going freight in the Southeast Asia region. And even Singapore has been a concerning question as well, because while Singapore has a lot of, say, storage capacity, an example here, I don't think I got that slide in there. I'll actually just show it up here real quick. Actually back out. Open it back up. They only have about 21 days of storage in terms of low sulfur fuel in Singapore. And what's interesting about that is there's still more coming out of Singapore than going into Singapore. And so there's a concern in generally, even though you do have some other options, right? Like you got Port Klang there, but it's just such a smaller footprint when it comes to ocean going fuel that, to your point, what's getting prioritized to be providing energy to? And it's crunch time for the subcontinent and Southeast Asia right now. I mean, even in Vietnam, they're canceling commercial airline flights for passengers due to lack of access to jet fuel.
Yeah, and that also the diversion, like when you're cutting air freight, that cuts air freight, and so that means you're going to have to put it on a boat if you can, because some of this stuff you can't.
Yeah, exactly. That air freight capability and capacity has been playing out as well. So like the air freight capacity that was available due to airport closures, flight cancellations, et cetera, was dropping, but then the actual rate for air freight was also climbing, and we were projecting that out and to next week right now as well. And so it's a different world, and it's almost like a different world. It feels like on a quarter by quarter basis at this point, maybe even month by month basis.
Right.
Yeah. And this all heads right into, June, July, and August, our favorite months, when it comes to bringing in our product. And so it's going to be a very interesting peak season.
Yeah. And
this year.
Speaking of like peak season, with the US being one of those major destinations, just Europe to the US bookings to date so far this year, right? There's a decent volume pickup in, say, week 10, week 11 this year. But then also looking at China, the US bookings, which has been a interesting fluctuation. Of course, we had Chinese New Year. The week changes each year, every 7 years type of thing. But the net of it is that there is just less volume coming from China to the US. It's coming from other places now.
Yeah, and it's coming from other places with an asterisk, because we all know that China moved to Vietnam, and that's why we're seeing what's happening with Vietnam right now. And when you look at like footwear, right? A lot of footwear comes out of Vietnam. And let's look at that chart, because that's like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Look at that.
Cambodia. I mean, Vietnam for sure is just as far as volume absorbing a lot of that. But the growth in Cambodia, 233,000 more TEU booked this year so far than last year.
Yeah.
And Lori Ann, to your point earlier about it, that's questions like you're looking about where the supply chain will be next. Cambodia is one of these excellent examples because the cost of labor in Vietnam has climbed quite a bit in the past 10 years. Cambodia is the cheaper option now.
Yeah. So in terms of looking, way into the future, you've got a +1 strategy with Vietnam established, but do you need an additional +1? Looks like a lot of folks are moving to Cambodia as well.
And it's an easier lift too. I mean, you see China with its investments in Africa, that's going to take some time. Cambodia, just from a proximity standpoint, right? It's like rinse and repeat. China has the game plan. They know what to do. They have their game plan. They bring their people in, right, to run everything. And then they bring the local folk in to increase. But what's exciting about this as well is that with the introduction of trade, it creates a middle class. And so if we create that middle class and the better paying jobs with the manufacturing, that only helps the world of trade even more, right? Because you're going to have a society that can consume more
consumers. Yeah,
exactly. So it's exciting to see, but China, they'll just keep on building out, and they're also building up into the hinterland. I was speaking with the port of Guangzhou, and they have seen a massive increase intermodal wise, because you've got more manufacturing plants now moving into hinterland because it's cheaper.
Makes sense.
So even within China, you're seeing a change.
And this is just a domino story that's been playing out since the 1960s, right? Japan first, then Korea, then China, then Vietnam, next Cambodia, India. So it's just going to keep shifting, and that kind of, say, lower capital investment, simpler production products will shift to the next cheap labor location.
Exactly.
Every 10 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just helps trade. It just helps all the participants in trade.
Well, wow, this was great. We clearly have so much we want to talk about. We are about 5 minutes over now. Thank you for everyone who stayed on. And I just want to offer Lori Ann the floor here. Any parting comments, words of wisdom, or watch outs for our audience?
I'm just saying, like, keep the tabs on the chemicals. I mean, chemicals matter. It's not just crude. And also, the price of crude doesn't reflect the reality of what is going on. because the Strait of Hormuz is never going to be the same once it reopens, between LNG having to be repaired and with the crude refineries and the pipelines. Everything goes back. Energy is such a huge building component for our lives. And it's not just filling up our gas tank, but for the making of our products. And so that's what I'm really keeping a keen look at right now.
Quick question and a point of comparison. What's different about the world now compared to the last time the Strait of Hormuz saw something like this, which I think was at the end of the Reagan industry with like enduring something other mission where the destroyers were escorting ships through, etc.?
Well, first of all, like, we've got way more people, right, in the world. We're consuming a ton. We're pigs. And we're pigs for cheap goods. And a lot of the cheap goods are made from plastic. So, we're driving more. There are a lot of people now after COVID that do work from home. But, a lot of times people have moved. And so you got to travel further distances to get to work. Mm-hmm. And so I think, even with our kids being highly programmed with all sports and stuff, you're driving your kid, you're like a taxi cab driver. So I think the way of our life has changed exponentially. And this, by far, from what I've spoken to, Kyle, like with my contacts, this is worse than COVID. This is worse than COVID from a supply chain perspective, because the critical components that are needed are dwindling fast in order to create the product. Whereas before, you still had that product flowing. It's just that it was less people making the product.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Well, thank you all. Yeah, thank you all for joining. Lori Ann, thank you so much for joining us as a guest. Please check out her event, containersdon'tlie.com, and we'll see you all again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.